we all had such unique experiences of SAFTA that it was hard to actually pull together one cohesive thought. This led us to realize that our greatest collective memory is our individual bonds with SAFTA. So whether she misremembered our pet parrots, or built up our international doll collections, lived less than an hour away, or traveled solo with us, each experience was part of our personal relationship, our own personal relationship with her. Yes, she was a matriarch and passed on traits that we each have, even if we don't quite figure out for many years to come what we all share. But perhaps more importantly, she was each of our SAFTAs. So to that end, some of us are going to offer just some memories that we each individually have of SAFTA in hopes of showing how much she listened, respected, and honored us as individuals. Just for this fact alone, even though she gave us so much more, we're all better versions of what we otherwise would be. So I will offer my first memory of so many, but I think we've spoken a little bit about just what she did in the last year of her life. And after our wedding last year, she insisted, I guess, on staying in New York for 5 days by herself, and saw many of us who live around the New York area and had brunch with Ethan and I, and we said, well, what have you been doing? And she was like, I walk around, I get lost, a policeman points me in the right direction, it's great. She had the best attitude. I think people don't, I would get very upset if I were lost in a city that I hadn't really spent time in alone in decades. But New York, she would talk to me about, was a period of time in her 20s, I think, when she, or I guess while she was in Antioch, she did an internship in a chemist lab, and she talks about New York as she was just this independent woman running all over New York, and she did that same thing at 87, so it's just a really special memory that I have. And one thing that I'm going to say on behalf of Maya, who asked me to say this, who was with her at the time that SAFTA passed away and with her in the hospital, wanted me to just say that it's very, very hard to put into words what she feels, and she loves her very, very much, and she hopes that SAFTA is hearing these words.
So I guess I wrote a little thing about SAFTA I'll share. Spent a lot less time with her as I got older, but in a lot of ways I feel like I got to know her more and more as I became an adult, and could compare a lot of what she told me and things I noticed about her with my everyday life. And I think for fun's sake, I could list off a lot of amazing things about SAFTA, but I'd like to focus on some of the things I liked to tease her on and how they really have come to light in a different way as I've gotten older. I remember when SAFTA told me all about her friend Fran, who she met when she was 5 years old, who lived in England, who she played Scrabble with. I didn't ask about Fran, and I didn't know why SAFTA was telling me about her every single time she told me to, or she told me about her. That was then, and this is now. And sometimes I message my old college roommate, or I tell my girlfriend all about an old high school friend, and she looks at me confused, and I think, why on earth do I stay in touch with this person? Or why am I telling my girlfriend about a long-lost friend? And then I think of SAFTA and Fran, and I realize I talk to them, and I talk about them simply because I love them. I remember when SAFTA sent me some of her writing from an unfinished memoir of sorts she was working on. Although I thought she always had an incredible memory, to be honest, I found it confusing and foggy. I figured her memory doesn't seem like it's fading, and maybe she just doesn't write well, and I wondered why she was writing any of this down at all. That was then, and this is now, and it's clear to me that she remembered everything with clarity and granularity, and it's clear to me she wasn't writing to remember, she was writing to honor. I remember SAFTA's paintings. To this day, I don't think her paintings are very good, but they have plenty of character. She once gave me a painting of my pet lovebird just after he had died. They looked nothing alike, and although his name was Captain Lovebird, she wrote his name down Captain John. My dad hung up the painting in my room. I was probably reluctant, and I never paid any attention to it. One day, I was in a flurry to write some notes about a video game I was playing, but I had no paper in sight. Then I saw it. I dismounted the painting and wrote all over the back of it. That was then and this is now. And now I appreciate that painting a lot more. Because now I know just how hard it is to do something not because you're good at it, but because you love it. And I don't think this writing is very good, but it was written with love. And as long as it has half the character her paintings had, I'll be happy. This is now, and this is how I remember Safta.
Well, I just wanted to share with you guys that ever since I was a little girl, Safta and I really shared huge love for travel and for experiencing other cultures. And I think ever since I was about 5, every time I saw her, we'd try to plan out some grand travel scheme. For the most part, they didn't actually end up working out, but recently, about 3 years ago, she did take me to Italy. We had a wonderful time, and she struggled to pretty much go anywhere because she had broken both of her legs. It was harder for her to walk, but she really tried. She took me to Pompeii, and she couldn't really explore most of it, but would still make that effort to show me around the city of Naples. And then a few years prior to that, her legs were bothering her as well. And I was visiting Nepal doing an internship at a hospital there, and she flew out. I had been sick for about 2 weeks. I think I drank the water or something. So I was recovering from that, and it really meant a lot that she came all that way to see me. And she got on an elephant with me, even though it was very uncomfortable. She went on a hike, she got lost. She wanted to sit down or something. We were looking for tigers or something. And we were warned about snakes, rhinos, sloth bears, which I guess are a very dangerous thing there, leopards, wild elephants, every kind of danger. And Safta was just perfectly fine sitting there and waiting for me to go on this walk and come back, and she insisted that I go. So she really was fearless, and it was a great memory I shared with her, and I miss her very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, I don't know if there, at this point, any other, that's really lovely. If there are other grandchildren or maybe nieces and nephews, you're a niece. And just from this point, if you feel like sharing, share, but still come up here so we can be in the video. Thank you.
First, I want to say that we did not plan, my sister and I did not plan to dress exactly alike today. She gave me this shirt, and I said, oh, this is good. And then as I'm walking out the door, she texts me wearing orange shirts. Here we are, identical twins, only 11 years apart, which is what my mother was to her sister, Netta. The other thing I'm just going to say before I read, this is something that we wrote together. Is that we lived in Israel, and after Yael was born, she came and helped me out. And she was very willing to come and cook, and my parents were going to come in a couple of weeks, so I was very grateful for that. And we had several little adventures in Israel and in America together. So maybe I'll put on these glasses so I can read it correctly. Who would ever think that would happen? Our Aunt Netta. Our Aunt Netta was our only out-of-town aunt. Whereas our parents stayed rooted in Rochester, Netta lived in Rochester, Antioch, Boston, New York City, Buffalo, Topeka, Kansas, Cincinnati, Kent, Ohio, Windsor, Canada, Haifa, Israel, Herzliya, and finally, Nofion. Have I left any places out? Aunt Netta was our adventurous and curious aunt, traveling all over the world well into her 80s. She was our resourceful aunt, always on the lookout for a bargain. Sometimes she was our naughty aunt, smoking cigarettes, involved in petty smuggling across the U.S.-Canadian border, and bragging about it. Aunt Netta was our loyal aunt, keeping contact with both family and old friends for decades. She was our idealistic aunt, engaged in the civil rights movement and in social justice activities throughout her life. She was a woman of all trades, a wife, a sister, daughter, mother, grandmother, aunt, cook, friend, student, speech pathologist, therapist, artist, musician, and memoirist. She actually came, I was working in Haifa, and she led groups, and she came to the agency that I worked at and led a group, and I was like so uncomfortable. Oh my my aunt, I just had to like suck it up and just go with it. And it ended up alright. She resisted the idea of aging and carried out her life with a vigor and easy laugh and an attitude, swimming and playing in the orchestra and entertaining until the end. In other words, our Aunt Netta was a force of nature. As an aunt, we all had the feeling that she wanted to know us and that she was interested in our lives and ideas. She shared books with us, played Scrabble online with some of us, shared her life with us, and opened her home to many of us on different occasions. Netta had a special relationship with Louis. They were only 14 years apart in age, and in many ways, she was a big sister to him, especially when they were young. When Aunt Netta came to town, it was an event, anticipated with pleasure by, and especially by all of us, and especially by our mother. We all recall various trips to visit the Kaplans. We went to Buffalo and visited their small apartment. Joe, Ruth, and our folks visited them in Topeka. Debbie, Ann, and Jane all traveled to visit the Kaplans at some point in our childhood. It was always an adventure. And Netta remembered the day each of us was born. She was working at the Mount Sinai Hospital the day I was born. She always told me that. In many respects, she was the family historian. Beyond her nieces and nephews, Netta also warmly embraced their spouses, partners, and children. Debbie remembered her coming up to Haifa and helping out after Yael was born. It was the most appreciated. Jill and Joe remember visits both here and in Israel fondly. Jill still raves about the kissy cake that Netta made on one occasion. It remains a favorite. Any of her nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews who spent time in Israel visited their beautiful home in Nof Yam, often spending some nights or sharing a meal with them. Our Aunt Netta spent her 89 years well. Married at our house on Berkeley Street, Netta and Marvin were married for 67 years. She loved her family, loved adventure, loved her friends, and we were lucky to have her as our aunt. And that's all of us. Ann, Hal, Debbie, George, Jane, Les, Joseph, Jill, Ruth, and Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, I have some similar things that Debbie said, but mine's a little different. So, Aunt Netta was my dad's baby sister. That's how he always referred to her. The Kaplan family always lived out of town, so I looked forward to their visits. As a child, I thought of Aunt Netta as my bohemian aunt, who was modern and upbeat. She always talked about Antioch College and her friendship with Coretta King. As I grew older, I continued to look forward to their visits from Windsor and then Israel. She always brought me and then my children special little gifts, sometimes a painting that she had done, which we all have various opinions about, apparently. Whoops, lost my place. Okay. One of the get-togethers she always reminisced about was when my daughter Julie was a baby and we went to Carnegie Deli. She was very upset when she learned that they were closing. I enjoyed my special conversations with her, whether in Cape Cod, Boston, Maine, Israel, West Point, Rochester, Yorktown, or New York City. She had a free spirit and loved to travel and was full of energy. I was amazed last year when she came to New York and went to dinner with us, Joe and Jill. She was very concerned about my illness and really wanted to see me. She was determined that she could make the trip to us by train, but we thought differently and arranged to go into the city. It was a pleasure to have that time together. I'm so glad that we were able to see her then. One funny story that I have is years back, I received a package from her in the mail that she pretended it was from my dad. She actually wrote this letter to me as if it was coming from my dad, but he had already passed away. She sent me a wooden Fanny Farmer box that she said she had had for years and took from one place to the next wherever she lived, with her little treasures enclosed in it. Apparently, Irv had given it to his mother when he was 18, and it was Mother's Day. So Netta felt it rightfully belonged to me. It was an odd experience when I questioned Aunt Netta, and she thought it was just hysterical. She said, "Wasn't I funny?" That was her sense of humor.
Wait, the whole thing was fake?
No, the box was real,
Oh,
but
okay.
the
Oh,
letter
I
was
see.
fake. The letter was, she pretended it was from my father.
And she thought she might.
She
go
thought that
out
was
with it.
really funny. But she would be happy to know that I have it on a shelf now and I filled it with some of my little treasures. She always told me that I look like her, even though Ruth thinks she looks like her.
We'll have that
But-
have a competition.
Yeah, well, actually, I think as she aged, she looked like my dad. And in that picture, I see my dad. And I think that would make her happy.
I have something brief I'd like to share. I'm her great nephew, and I just remember for the longest time the way I knew Marvin and Netta was they would come to visit Cape Cod, and I didn't really have a concept of people being able to live in two places. So for me, they were my Cape Cod relatives. And I remember one time I said to them, I just learned this, it was such a source of pride. I said, did you know I have an aunt and uncle that live in Israel? And, you know, up until last year, Netta would never let me live that down, and she would continue to tease me about it. And when I think of visiting Israel, I think of going to their lovely apartment in Nof Yam, and the warmth and the laughter I've experienced there. And I'm still coming to grips with the fact that, you know, there's going to be a piece of that missing, but I definitely appreciate all the times I spent with them. Thank you.
I guess I'll share, yeah. One memory that concerns her vigor, which is when we used to visit Cape Cod and ride our bicycles up the hill, and she was in her 70s, and she was out in front. She was way out in front. And it wasn't like she wasn't smoking cigarettes and doing all those things. And then I think Alexandra would remember, she sat on the beach drinking lemonade out of a plastic bottle of what had been plastic bottle of gin. And, you know, it was sort of raw, and like, here's this woman who's got this bottle of gin, it's really lemonade, maybe. After this bike ride where we couldn't keep up with her, so that's the force of nature that I remember that.
I don't have any real specific memory, but I did want to echo what Debbie said, was that she was with you. She was interested in you, whether you were 10 years old or 20 years old or 40 years old. When you were with Netta, she wanted to know about you, and she wanted to know that she cared about you, and that means so much.
Oh, please, please.
If you don't want to go to the front, what?
No, I think.
No, if it's inhibiting anybody, I was.
When it was very interesting, both your parents filled the role for us. Laura and I, our parents have been gone for a long time, and they actually filled the role of elder. It's nice to have elders, so you're not the oldest. And like Debbie said, she was very interested in everything going on with you. I think she was always psychoanalyzing everything. And she was very good to our children. When our children did Birthright in Israel, they made time to get together and see them. And then we did visit them a lot. When my parents were gone, whenever they were here, we'd go see them in Boston or Maine, and then they would come here. I think last year they were here, or 2 years ago, we did the trip. The same, we did the trip around Rochester. And
I went in the water with your father. He made us take our shoes off and go into Lake Ontario.
And then here's the funny thing, you know, while you're married 68 years, so we'd be sitting talking, and every once in a while they'd go at it. And once
Just
she,
every once.
and once she said, "We're married, you know."
She said that to
you, just to remind you.
To Mark.
To define the bickering.
Yeah. Well,
We know Michael's gonna talk, so Mike, might as well get Michael to come in.
I have a picture gallery of some of her paintings, and so I sent those around filing cabinet.
they're right over here now.
Michael, you have to talk now or forever hold your peace.
I understand what I was looking for something that I read to several people.
That's all right, we can hear
And
you.
I can't find it, but I can paraphrase it, right?
Yes, of course.
Because it doesn't have exactly the same as the literally reading it. But in 1942, my father was in the Army Air Corps being trained to go overseas. And Netta wrote him a letter. She had just finished the 8th grade. And she said, "Dear Irving, I have nothing to do except practice, meaning for violin, so I guess I'll write you a letter." And so she wrote, and she said, "I finished 8th grade, and you'll be glad to know that my average for all of my classes was 95.5%. That's pretty good, isn't it? And then she said, and I got 100 in math. Now, it's not as good as you in math, but I'm, and then she, so that was maybe the, really one rich part of it, but the rest of it was talking about, or writing about, this was War Week, which meant that they were having parades, and they were having this practice exercise at Blessed Sacrament Church, where they were dropping supposed bombs from the Japanese planes, and so it was very rich, and I will make copies of it once I find it again for people, but it was in the midst of these letters that I'm looking at, to find this letter was really a thrill to have it and to see, and it was cute, and it had real connections to people in the family and talking about the parade, and our Uncle Abe, who was a dentist, had an office over in the Cutler Building, was that, on East Avenue, and they all sat up there so they could look, and Uncle Abe marched in the parade, and then she said, and Lester marched in the parade, and she said, and Florence didn't march, and I'm not sure why, I don't understand. Of course, she was being silly because it was a month and a half before Lewis was born, so so I think Florence just couldn't march because of that. But it was very touching. So I'm sorry, I don't have the exact letter with me right this minute, but
Thank
you get a feel.
Thank
love
you.
to see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Probably right in my color, not in the places I looked.
When you're gonna bring
And then.
yeah, so I was just gonna,
We should give last
yeah.
opportunity to speak and then just picture.
So is there anyone else, as I said, if it intimidates you to come up here, feel free to,
But it's okay, that's fine. Yeah.
feel free to stand where you are, or sit.
I just want to say, I think this is a really beautiful tribute to a really wonderful person, and it's really nice to have all the cousins and siblings together, so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Maybe,
Credit to you.
I hadn't, somewhere in my thoughts were, let's take a picture